So we have a couple men that's going to share testimonies with us tonight. Real quick, right before they do, I'm going to share just a little bit of something with you. It comes out of the Gospel of Luke. I have just got done reading the Gospels in the last few days, and most of the time, if you notice in the Gospels when you're reading, a lot of time when Jesus would do something in someone's life, a lot of times he would tell them not to go and tell no one. He'd say, just don't tell nobody. Just go back. And what I feel like he was saying, just go back and people's going to be able to see what I've done in your life. Because a lot of times it was true miracles. But there was one that stuck out to me in the book of Luke, and it was in the chapter 8. And I ain't going to read the whole thing, but he was healing this man that had demons in him. And at the end of it, he said, return to your home and declare how much that God has done for you. And that's what we're going to do tonight. We all have past. If we opened up what we've done in our life, some of us would be scared to sit next to each other in here. That's just the truth of it. Preachers included. Just because we're up here, we're just filthy rags too. But tonight we're going to have an opportunity to hear from two of our people that calls this place home. And tonight they're going to share what God's done in their lives. So Brother David and Brother Nick, if you guys want to come on up. I don't know who wants to go first. Don't matter to us. He says David, so we'll let David go first. So Brother David Lancaster, of course you guys all know him. He's been here with us for a long time now. Brother Nick Rose, he's been coming here, about 3 or 4 weeks with us? About a month. Brother Nick actually graduated the Hope Center, which is coming here. And I think that you're going to hear in his testimony, I really think that God has handpicked this man for the Hope Center that's coming here. He has a testimony, and he's always looking for the next one. And I'll let him talk about that a little bit later. Brother David.
Good afternoon, church. These last two songs, they was pretty much played for me. Kirsten, I know who all is grateful that there is power in his name. Who all is grateful that hell has forever been defeated. Because I can tell you right now, if hell wasn't defeated, this old boy wouldn't be sitting here. Mine started off at an early age. Never was took to church. Didn't know what church was. My early age consisted of woods or a lake, either hunting or fishing. That was my weekend. That was my Sunday, and that's all I cared about. I was brought up in a home, and my daddy, he was an angry man. So I was always around anger, and it sort of rubbed off on me. As I was growing up, I was a very angry man, or angry boy. Back when I was young, I loved to fight. And it didn't take much just to tick me plumb off. I can remember one day, I think I was probably maybe 5 or 6 years old, standing in the front yard, and a preacher lived beside us. And his son was probably 18, 19 year old, big old boy. And he made me mad, and I flew all over him. Of course, now he could have killed me, but it didn't matter to me. And that was just the anger that I had felt for so many years and seen for so many years. And so that's what I thought was right in my mind. If you didn't like something, you either give them a good cussing or you hit them in the mouth. That's just the way I was brought up. So then, got on through years. Mom and Daddy divorced. Of course, I was tired of both of them. Picked the phone up, called my grandpa, and told him, I said, Pa, come get me. He said, I'll be there in just a few minutes. So since I was in the 8th grade, my grandma and grandpa raised me. And very thankful for that. So life went on. Then when I got to be a freshman in high school, still didn't know what church was, didn't have a clue. I started having seizures. I had my first seizure when I was a freshman in high school. I'd like to have died. If it wouldn't have been for my grandpa trying to dig my tongue out from my throat, I would have died. So there for probably about 4 years, I was continuing to have seizures. I was having anywhere from 20 to 30 seizures a day. So on up into the ages of 16, 17-year-old, if it wasn't for the good Lord, which I didn't know that at the time, I don't know how many seizures I had while I was driving. So the Lord surrounded me, but at that particular time, I didn't know nothing about that. Didn't really care about it. On up into years, I got married. August the 15th, 1985 was one of the greatest days of my life. That's when my son Tyler was born. He went on to be a very godly man. Still, didn't really care nothing about church. I'd go every once in a while, but I made sure that he was in church. On up to the age of 12 years old, he was called to preach. When he was 13 years old, he preached his first sermon. I went to that, and as soon as he done, I walked out the door. So on up to when he turned, right before he turned 16-year-old. September the 15th, 2001 was when my life went to pot. This was the day that I got the phone call that I hope and pray that nobody ever receives. I got the phone call saying that Tyler had been in a bad wreck. I was working in Portland, Tennessee at that particular time. So I more or less just run by my boss's office and said, I'm gone. I'll see you whenever. So from Portland to Livingston, that's a good 2-hour drive. When I pulled out of the parking lot, I made it from Portland to Livingston Hospital in 40 minutes. And that is getting pulled over by a state trooper in Lafayette. Got to the hospital, walked in the hospital. I know something was wrong because my daddy met me at the door, and I pretty much knocked him out of the way, run in the hospital, and there stood a police officer in front of his door. So I knew something was wrong. So I started in the door, and the police officer told me that I couldn't go in yet. Well, I proceeded to grab him by the belt loop and the shirt collar, and I throwed him across the emergency room. And this was when my anger started to come back out full force. So once I got into the room, he was pronounced dead. So this is where my life took a major, major turn. The day that he was in the funeral home, I was standing outside with a good friend of mine, and there was a boy come up. Didn't mean nothing by it, but he said something that absolutely just run all over me. And before I knowed it, I had him by the throat, picked up off the ground, and was holding him there. And if it wouldn't have been for my friend, I would have probably have killed him, because when I finally turned him loose, he was blue. And it went downhill from there. I got to the point of, if you looked at me cross-eyed, I was fixing to fly into you. I didn't care. I didn't care about nobody. My life was gone. So after we put him in the ground, I went home. And we lived out in the middle of nowhere. I walked outside in my backyard, and I was screaming at God. I called him everything but a God. I was mad. I didn't care. And we've heard a lot of testimonies in here, and we've heard about those little guys on your shoulder. Well, I had the devil over here, and he was raging. So, David, you're useless. You're done. Your life is over. You have no sense even being here now. And I thought, well, yeah, that's pretty much it. So I walked in the house. There was a loaded 44 Magnum, pretty much brand new, hanging on the bedpost. I went and got it. And like I said, I lived out in the middle of nowhere. I walked out probably about a mile from the house, out in the middle of a big old cedar thicket that most people couldn't even hear the gun roar. And they didn't nobody know where I was. So I sat there and I said, all right, you get what you wanted. I'm done. I'm over. I'm through. I'm tired of living like this. I'm not going to go through life like this. I have no reason of being here. So I cocked it, and I shoved it in the roof of my mouth. And at that particular time, I just put one finger on it and tried to squeeze it, and it would not go off. What's wrong with this? So I let the hammer back down on it, cocked it back again. I put two fingers on it and tried with everything that I had in me to pull the trigger, and it wouldn't pull. I thought, all right. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, all right, Lord, I don't know what's going on, but I'm tired. I'm ready to go. So I done it one more time. I cocked it, stuck it in the roof of my mouth, and I took both thumbs and put on this. And my thumbs, I was trying to squeeze so hard that my thumbs got white-knuckled. And I thought, all right, Lord, I don't know what you have in store. Something's got to change. So I started walking back to the house. Got up to the house, and I said, Lord, if this is you, let this gun go off. I cocked this gun, pointed it at a tree, and barely touched the trigger, and it went boom. And I said, all right. Walked in the house, and I said, okay, Lord, don't know what your plan is, don't have a clue, don't know, but something's got to change. So I sat there, it was probably about a week, more or less still watering in my pity, and the phone rung. I answered the phone, and I said, hello. She said, is this David Lancaster? And I said, yes, it is. She said, you don't know me. And I said, okay, how can I help you? She said, I just lost my child in an accident, and somebody told me what you had been through and that you were still here, that you might could talk to me. And I said, ma'am, I will do what I can, but I'm still fresh. I said, but I will do what I can. So and then after about a year, I probably talked to about 15 different families that lost their loved ones. And I thought, all right, Lord, I see where we're going with this. So then in the meantime, my wife at the time, she was miserable. All she wanted to do was die. Tried to talk to her, and it became just a struggle every time we talked. So it began again of the anger situation. We wound up getting divorced. I took a camper, and I lived in the camper for months. Started drinking. Of course, that didn't help the anger issues. After about 2 years, we got back together. Things was fair, but it didn't really, what you'd say, change things. We still fussed and fought. And then she proceeded to have some medical issues, and she had to have some surgeries and stuff, and she got hooked on pain pills. So then my stress level went way high because I never knew what I was going to come home to. I would come home sometimes that she would be passed out on the couch, stretched out in the floor, lamps, tables turned over, house filled full of smoke. Never knew what I would come home to. So my stress level went way high. And within probably a month, now maybe about 2 months, I lost probably 80 pounds from nothing but stress and anger issues. So over the next course of a little bit, I didn't have nobody. Didn't have nobody to turn to, didn't have nobody to talk to. And then there was a lady that was very good friends with my wife, Sheila. Matter of fact, that's Melody, my wife now. They was very good friends. And it got to where that was the only person that I could ever turn to. Melody has been in the hospitals with me. She's been in nursing homes with me. She was my, what you would say, she was my other lifesaver. I had got to the point, Sheila was in a nursing home. No matter of fact, she was in the hospital at this time. She was pretty much laying on her deathbed. And I was pretty much at that point of being done again. Melody had been to the hospital, and she had got to minister and pray with a couple at the hospital. And she actually come by to check on me. And when she walked in the door, she was glowing. Tears streaming down her face, but they was tears of joy. She come in, she sat down on the couch, and we talked for a minute, and she got up, she got ready to leave, and she said, "David, can I pray for you?" So, but the whole time that she was sitting there on this couch, you could see this glow about her. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, that's what I want. That's what I want. I want that glow. I want that joy. I want that happiness back. So as she got ready to leave, she got up, she took my hands and she prayed for me. But the second that she took my hands, it was like the Spirit just run through her, back through me. And I could honestly say I have never felt that feeling before. So over the next little bit, my wife, she finally passed away. And, of course, the one person that was there was Melody. And she got me talked into to come into church here. The minute I walked through them doors, I knew I was home. I have never in my life felt a place. I've never felt the Spirit in a place like I did when I walked through these doors, the love. And I knew I was home, and I knew I had a family. So over the next little bit, me and Melody, we started seeing each other. And then on July the 27th was one of the other greatest days of my life. That's when I said I do to her. And life has been, I never knew what true joy and true happiness felt like until that day that I said I do. It has been an amazing ride. So this is where my, and I know there's been a lot of testimonies come through this place with addictions and other things like that. Mine was anger. Mine was hurt. Mine was mainly being lost. Until I could say that I truly met one of Jesus' children.
That man, I appreciate you sharing that. I do appreciate that. I always like hearing other people's testimonies, and when you sit back, like people like me and you, and I get to sit back and I get to say, it reminds me every day that I'm not as unique as I sometimes thought that I was. That my problems and my struggles are not just unique to me; they're unique to everybody. And I felt that made me feel isolated as a kid, is feeling like I was the only one that dealt with the things that I dealt with. Anger being one of them, for sure. Uh, I'll start out, man. I was born in Tampa, Florida, Plant City. If you're familiar with Florida, then you know where Plant City is. If not, I just say Tampa because it's the same thing. I was born in Tampa. My mom and dad, they had okay relationship until I was about 4. They divorced when I was 4, and my mom moved to Tennessee. My dad stayed in Florida. My mom took us with me. It was me and my younger brother Joseph. We went to Tennessee with my mom, and everything kind of went good. It was different. I don't have a whole lot of memory of my childhood. In all reality, I don't really remember anything under the age of 12. Around 12 is where I lost most of my memory, 12 and before. I remember stories. I remember what my mom has told me. But my dad had me on so many drugs as a kid that I don't remember any of my childhood. Um, and so it's kind of weird when I hear people say, like, yeah, man, I remember when I was 8. I was like, that must be nice. Like, I don't remember any of that. I don't have any recollection of it. So anyways, moved to Tennessee, and with my mom and her and my godmother, which was her sponsor at the time. Um, and it was okay. There was a custody battle between my mom and my dad for several years, so we were constantly back and forth between Florida and Tennessee. Um, my mom had remarried. It was probably, I don't know. I was somewhere between 6 and 9. I don't remember what day they got married. I don't remember what age I was. I just know that it was somewhere between there. And she had my 3 younger brothers. She had 2 twins, and the youngest one a year and 2 days apart. And we were staying in Pleasant Shade over in Carthage. And the man that she married wasn't exactly, he wasn't a winner. He had a total knee replacement when he was about 30, something like that, and became a pill addict after that. And he stayed on them pretty heavy. And at that age, I didn't understand what that was. I didn't know what that was. I just knew that he was bitter and he was angry all the time. When I was about 10 or 11, he started getting extremely physical. And by the time I was 12, I was bigger than he was, and he had a tendency to always put his hands on me. We'll just leave it at that. And so I grew up extremely angry because that was my natural defense to his abuse, was rage. Because I knew that I was bigger than him, and I knew that if I acted angrier than him, that seemed like he backed off. And so aggression was always my go-to defense on everything. I figured that if I could make people afraid of me in any situation, that I was okay, and that's what he taught me. That's all I knew. And so anyways, when I was 12, we got into a fight. I ended up going to jail. The cops, he was buddy with all the cops there, and they took me to jail. And so I went into state's custody. Became a ward of the state, and stayed that way till I was 17 and a half. I bounced around from every boys' home to youth detention center to Putnam County Juvenile for 4.5 years. I wouldn't go home. I spent I spent about a year and a half in New Frontiers, which is a boys' home in DeKalb County. I spent about another year and a half at Indian Mound, which is another boys' home. After I wore out my welcome at one boys' home because I kept getting into fights. They ended up disrupting me, and I went over to Indian Mound, which is another boys' home. I stayed there for about a year, and then I caught a runaway charge. I ran away from that place, and the DeKalb County Sheriff picked me up. I was like 15 or something like that, and anyway, so stayed there, and then after I had been in front of Judge Cook so many times, he said, "Son, I'm done with you." He said, "I want you out of my county." He said, "You've done nothing but cause problems ever since you've stepped foot in this county." He said, "I want you gone." So I went to the other side of the state. I went to Natchez Straight Youth Academy, which is if you guys are familiar with the juvenile system in Tennessee, they have 4 different levels: 1, 2, 3, and 4. Level 1 being a foster home, level 4 being like a youth prison. And so Natchez Trace was a level 3. They bumped me up in status, so they sent me over there, and that program did pretty good for me. That program taught me a little bit of responsibility, a little. I didn't really. The state raised me, so I never had an opportunity as a kid to have a first job and get a first car and learn how to deal with finances. Everything that I did on a daily basis was printed on black and white. I knew what time I was going to use the restroom. I knew what time I was going to go to bed. I knew exactly how my bed had to be in the mornings. I knew exactly what time I was going to eat, and that schedule stayed the same. It never changed. So I naturally grew into a very structured environment. But anyways, that program did pretty good. Natchez Trace was a pretty good program for me. It taught me a little bit of responsibility. I still had an anger issue. My number one go-to was to lay hands on somebody. Me and you we share that, and I noticed that when you said that, I was like, okay, so I don't feel like such a psycho when I hear other people say that. I'm like, I'm really not just like this aggressive psychopath. Like, like other people share my issues, but anyways, so stayed there for about a year and a half. And I had plenty of opportunities to go home when I was a kid. I would do good for so long, and then once they talked about sending me back home, I said, "No, you don't. I will ruin it for myself on purpose so that y'all cannot send me home." Home was not where I wanted to be. But anyways, so I stayed there till I was about 17 and a half. When they finally told me, they're like, "Look, man, you got to go. You ain't got to go home, but you can't stay here. You know, you've been in the state for 4 years. You're fixing to be an adult. Kick rocks." So I went back to my mom's house, and that didn't last very long. My stepdad was like, "No, don't want him here." And so she bought me a bus ticket and sent me down to Florida. Let me back up. I was drugged to church when I was a kid. When my mom lived with my stepdad, she was very religious. And I was always drugged to church, and I kind of enjoyed it. It was kind of a lifestyle to me at the time. I just knew I liked to play with kids there and play with my friends because it was the only interaction with kids that I got. I do remember that much about my childhood. And so anyways, I was drugged to church, so I did have some type of a Christian foundation. None of it stuck. None of it stuck at that time. And so anyway, she bought me a bus ticket, and I went down to Florida. And when I got off the bus, it was the first time that I had seen my biological father in years, like 10, 12 years, 10 years, something like that. He had never had anything to do with me and my brother. He was in the midst of trying to get clean himself. He was a crackhead and a big alcoholic. And so most of his absence was a result of that. And I didn't understand any of this at the time. But, you know, the older I get, the more I realize, you know, what was really going on behind the scenes that I didn't know about as a kid. And so anyways, I got off the bus, and it was the first time that I had seen him in years. I didn't, it was just like me looking at Todd, you know, somebody that I had only known for a month. I didn't have a relationship with my father. And my father didn't really have a relationship with me. I think he allowed me to come live with him just out of courtesy. It really wasn't because he wanted to. It was just, I don't think it was because he wanted to say yes. I think it was just because he didn't want to say no. And so anyways, that went okay for like 3 months. Um, you know, remind you when I was a kid, I never had any dose of what reality was like. I had never seen anything outside of the structured, sheltered environment of not only my childhood, but in state's custody. I didn't have an opportunity to go out and see what it was like when people got on drugs and what it did to them, and see firsthand that stuff. Um, so, anyways, went to Florida, and that went good for about 3 months. And I had this mentality of like, heck yeah, I'm 18. Can't nobody tell me what time I got to use the bathroom. Like, I'm good to go. And I did anything and everything that came to my mind. Um, it wasn't long before that I started using meth. Um, I was working a lot of hours at the time. I was working at 84 Lumber, and it was one of my first jobs. And I was working and staying busy. And I was over at a buddy's house. I lived in a trailer park. And if you guys are familiar with Florida, trailer parks mean bad news. Just about like anywhere, just about anywhere. Um, so, anyways, I was at a trailer park, and my buddies was smoking on a foil, and I was like, "Hey, man, I want to try that." And they're like, "No, you don't." And so, anyways, I did, and that roller coaster started. It didn't take but about another month, and I was using a needle, um, and became an IV user for quite some time. Uh, I started shooting up right before I turned 18, so I was 17. And once I started that, it had me. It had me. Um, by the time it was all said and done, I weighed about 160 pounds. I went to prison. I went to prison before I was 19. And before I went to prison, I became involved with gangs. This isn't something I talk about a whole lot. I keep this very brief just because I think that's the way that it should be. Um, I became involved with gangs. I became affiliated with MS-13, and wasn't long after I became affiliated with them that I was stealing trucks for them. So my first charge was grand theft auto before I was 19 years old, and went to prison off of it. And anyways, so I was in prison, and had been locked up several times. Like, I got locked up about every month and a half. I was in jail for something else. I couldn't stay clean. I didn't want to stay clean. I didn't see any need in staying clean. Um, I remember it got to one point where I was done. Like, I became an atheist. I didn't believe in God. Like, my mindset was that there's no way that there could have been a God and me still deal with what I've dealt with. I never felt a part of anything. I had never had anybody show me how to be a man. Um, Never had anybody. Like, it was just me. It was uno hombre for me. And so anyways, I was sitting in prison, and I was done. I was done getting locked up. I was done doing this crap. I was over it. And so I called my mom, and I told her, I was like, look, I don't really have any place to go when I get out of here. Dad doesn't want me there. He's tired of having all my gang friends over there and using dope in his house, and he's tired of it. He says I can't come back. Can I come back to Tennessee? And she said, yeah, I'll get you a bus ticket. And when you get out of prison, you can come straight up here. And that's what ended my affiliation with MS-13s. I just disappeared. When I walked out the gates, I never looked back. And I came back to Tennessee. And it wasn't over there. My sobriety at that time was forced. It wasn't because I wanted to be sober. It wasn't because I was necessarily done using. I was done with the crap that followed. And so anyways, I came back to Tennessee, and I did good for a couple months. Was going to NA meetings, and then I met a girl. And when she relapsed, I met a girl from NA. Let me clarify that. Met a girl at NA that had only been going to NA for like 2 weeks. She was only like 2 weeks sober. And I decided it was going to be a good idea to get in a relationship. And neither one of us had 30 days sober. And I now understand why they tell you to wait a year. Because that didn't go good. That lasted, I think it took us like 20 days tops before we were both using again. And so then we split up. We both went our separate ways. I got another job. I was working at Ace Hardware. And I did okay for a little bit. And I met another girl, and she was sober at the time. We were both sober at the time. But I happened to meet another girl that had the same type of previous addiction as I did. And anyway, so December 13th, 2019, I got a call from my mom. Um, I had already relapsed again at this point, and me and this girl were staying together at an apartment over on Dotson Branch. And I got a call from my mom, and she said that her and her boyfriend had gotten into a fight, and she needed a place to stay. And I was like, yeah, sure, I got you. And to me, like I had been done for a while. It had been a long time since I had fought anybody. It had been a long time since I had laid hands on anybody. I was just trying to be a little bit reserved and like under the radar. And when she said, hey, me and my boyfriend got in a fight, it was like I was looking for an excuse to go put hands on somebody. Like I wanted that. And so when I said, yeah, that's cool. You can come to the apartment. I'll be here when you get here. She said, okay, I'll be there in like 20 minutes. And as soon as I hung up the phone, I was putting my boots on. And my old lady's brother at the time, I said, hey, my mom's fixing to come here. She thinks I'm going to be here, but really I'm going to be on my way to Spencer to go hurt this guy. And he said, okay. And so anyways, I went to Spencer and slid into his driveway, locked the brakes up, slid in, kicked his front door in, and almost killed him. I give him an internal brain bleed, and they had to rush him to Vanderbilt. And because of that, because they did an MRI on him, they found out that he had a brain tumor the size of a golf ball that nobody knew about. And the doctor said it would have killed him. And I don't say that. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. I don't say that to say like, oh, good, that's a good thing that I put hands on him. That's not what I mean. But that was a turn of events of what happened. And so anyways, I did 5 months, did about 5 months in. They charged me with aggravated burglary, another felony on my record. And when I went to court, my mom and her boyfriend had told the judge, it was like, look, he wasn't there to rob anybody. He wasn't there to burglarize anything. It was me and him got into a fight. My son thought that he had put his hands on me and stood up for me. And so anyways, he dropped it down to 2 misdemeanors. He gave me 1129 with 5 months to serve, and I did my 5 months, and I got out. And the same night that I got out, I was getting high again with the same girl that I was with. She had relapsed while I was in jail. She was sober up until I went to jail, and then while I was in jail, then she relapsed. So when I got out, and she come picked me up, and she said she had been using again, I was like, well, heck yeah, let's go. And I thought that was cool. I was like, yes, I don't have to hide it anymore because I hid it from her for a long time. So anyways, we went back and we started using again. And a couple months after that, well, let's see, I got out in April, and it was like August or September or something like that. We had I'll keep it brief, we had our problems and we split up. And about a couple weeks after we had split up, she called me and said, Nick, I'm pregnant. I said, oh boy, that's interesting. And I said, are you sure? She said, yeah, I just left the doctor. She's like, I've been pregnant for 3 months and I didn't know it. And so anyways, at the time I had a warrant out for violation of probation because I had went to probation. Part of my sentence was that after I did the 5 months, I had to do the rest of it on probation. And it didn't take 2 months of being on probation, and I was already failing drug tests. So I had a couple warrants out, and I had kind of called and tried to turn myself in, but at the time, COVID had just really kicked off. COVID had just started for about 6 months, and they weren't taking anybody for anything serious. And so I just let it ride, and come the end of January, the end of December, beginning of January, I started working for a guy here in Cookeville, and he was a truck driver. And so I was riding all over the place with him, and he was one of the first guys that ever paid attention to me. He was the only one that really, even though I wasn't I wasn't his type that he normally associates with. I was a junkie at the time. I was a full-blown junkie. And I wasn't his type. I wasn't normally people that he associated with, but he's told me that there was something that drew him to me and that told him to give me a chance and to help me out. So I worked for him for a little bit, and we delivered a military dump truck to Florida. And coming up on the way back, we were coming up on 11, and he said, you're going to turn yourself in when we go by the jail. I was like, oh, that's not exactly what I had in mind. I don't want to face my problems. I wanted to run from it, and I wanted to postpone it. And he was like, no, you're going to turn yourself in. He's like, when we drive by the jail, I'm dropping you off, and you're going in. He's like, you don't have any say in it. And I was like, all right. So he said, but I promise you this, man. He said, you're not going to regret it. He said, you're going to do the right thing for once. And I knew that I had Evelyn. Evelyn is my daughter's name. I knew that Evelyn was on the way, and she was fixing to be born. She was born March 26th. And I knew that I was fixing to be a father for the first time. So part of me wanted to do something different. I wanted to be a man for once and stop being a boy. I wanted to get rid of the mentality that I could always run from the police and face problems, like not run from them. So anyways, I turned myself in January 25th, and went in front of the judge a couple days later, and he asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, I just want you to lay me down. Like, I only got like 3 more months to do. I'll get out with no probation. I'll be fine. And in my head at the time, I'm thinking I could pretty much use and not get caught. Like that was my mindset behind it. It was like, no probation, that's a win. I've got that. And so anyways, about a month goes by, and I was really stewing on that. I was like, man, I'm fixing to be a dad for the first time. And I've always talked crap about people who had kids and used while they had kids. And I always swore that I was not going to be that parent. Like, I was going to be a father and not just a dad. Because I never had one. And I know what it feels like to grow up without that father influence. So anyways, that month went by, and I put in a motion to go back in front of the judge. And when I went back in front of him, I said, Your Honor, I was just honest with him. I said, Your Honor, I've got a problem, and a very big one. I don't know how to stay clean. I have been shooting up since I was 17 years old. I don't know how to do this on my own. And I said, with your permission, I'd like to go to a treatment center. And he said, okay, no problem. You pick the one, and I'll send you. He said, I'll let you go whichever one you want to. And I probably only had to do like a 90-day treatment center. And when I reached out to a place called Miracle Lake, the guy that answered, his name was Derek. I'll never forget it. He said, well, man, you don't really qualify for our program because you would have to fail a drug test in order to get in. He said, but I'm going to give you the number of a lady who I think you qualify for greatly. He said, her name's Ashley, and she's the admissions liaison for Hope Center Ministries. And he said, give her a call. And I said, well, is she going to answer? Because I'm calling collect. Like, I'm broke. I don't have money, and this is a jail phone. And he's like, yes, she will answer. And I was like, okay, cool. So I give her a call. She did my application over the jail phone, which I thought was amazing. And when she told me Hope Center was a faith-based program, I didn't really know how I felt about that. I was still an atheist. Like, I didn't believe in anything other than our own self-will. And but she said she could get me in a week. So I was like, run it. Like, I get out of here in a week. A lot of places you've got to wait like a month or two before you can get into. I was like, a week, sold. So I got in, and I thought I was going to be pulling up to this like hospital place, like with like no trespassing signs and stuff like that. And I didn't. I pulled into a beautiful house in Hohenwald, Tennessee. It had just opened up. And I was like, wait, is this it? And they're like, yeah, this is the Hope Center. I was like, this is a house. They're like, we know. I was like, oh, okay, I could do this. Had 2 ponds, like 2 huge ponds out. There was one had a long driveway, had a pond in front of this house, a pond over here, stocked with fish. I was like, okay, this is gonna work out. Well, at least I kind of thought that. And I walked in the front door, and I still kind of had a little bit of the same mindset. I thought they were going to hook me up to blood pressure monitors and take my vitals and give me drug tests. And no, it was literally just a house. It was just a house. That was all it was. And so that made me feel a little comfortable. And there was like only 7 guys or 8 guys there. Like I said, they had just opened up. Like, they hadn't even been open for like 3 weeks. This center hadn't. And when I walked in the door, all these guys were like, man, what's your name? We're so glad to see you, brother. We love you. We're glad you're here. And I'm like, what? Like, you don't know me, man. You don't know me. Like, I didn't understand how people who had never met me could love me. I've been trying for years to love me, and I know me very well, and I can't even do it. And that was the first experience of the love of Christ that I had. That was the very first genuine, it sunk in, like, hey, this is what Christ did to people when he walked the earth, was he loved everybody. And so the first impression was it was different. It was different than what I was used to. I was used to being standoffish to people. Um, and so anyways, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the program, but there's 3 phases: first, second, and third phase. First phase is 45 days, and that is where you are at the house. You are at the house 24/7. You don't go to your vocational training contract. You go clean the church throughout the week. And it was a Thursday, and we were we were coming home. It was about 11 o'clock. We were coming home back to the house from cleaning the church, and I had been struggling. I saw that everybody that I was around was happy. I saw everybody who had been from the same walk of life that I had been through. They were at peace with being in rehab for a year and not having a cell phone and not having their car. Like, they were tickled to death, and I wanted that. Like, I couldn't even be that happy with those things. And so I saw everybody else have that peace, and they had that joy in them, and I wanted that. And so, like, I was, like, spiritually conflicted. I was like, I don't really know how this is going to work, but I want it to work. And I'm willing to do whatever this program tells me to do, the way that it tells me to do it, and I'm going to trust them because they obviously know what they're talking about, and I don't. My track record is horrible. Their track record seems to be pretty good. Like, why not give it a shot? So anyways, we were coming home from cleaning the church that day, and that song by Jeremy Camp came on. It was There Will Be a Day. And I've heard that song a million times. Like, I like the song, but it never quite hit me the way that it hit me that day, because I had been struggling with, okay, am I really going to buy into this? God is real, and Jesus, and this is what I was thinking. Am I really going to buy into this? Like, am I really going to commit and devote myself to this if I really want to be happy? And that song came on, and it was like a light switch, man. It was like the doubt of whether or not God is real was removed. I remember myself thinking that, I remember myself telling myself that God is real, Jesus died for me, and it's my job to serve him now. It's that simple. And so that's where, like, that is where I got saved moment. I didn't come up to an altar at church. I got saved right there in the seat of a van, and I haven't ever had a doubt since. So anyways, that's really about all I got. I mean, I could go, the program is a year. I did absolutely nothing but devote myself to that program. I went up to Pennsylvania in September to help open up a new Hope Center in Pennsylvania, and came back in November. I'm really grateful to be here. I remember several times when I was in Florida that I was about ready to just eat a bullet and be done with it. I thought that if this was all that life had to offer, then I'm out. Y'all can have it. I'm out. Like, I'm done with this. I had known nothing but pain and struggle since I was a kid. Like, for literally my entire memory, because I don't remember anything other than 12. From 12 to 21 has been nothing but a scratching claw battle of trying to survive and trying to become an adult and try to survive in custody and then try to survive in prison. It was like, it's constantly fighting, and I was done fighting. And if it wasn't for Hope Center Ministries and people just like y'all, I wouldn't be here. The Hope Center, the 99.999, let me rephrase that, 115% of Hope Center success comes from the foundation of the church family. Because almost, aside from the director and the recovery coordinator, everything there is done by the church people. Is the counselors, the Bible study teachers, the step study teachers. That's y'all. Y'all have that. Like, y'all pour into us on a daily basis and show people like me how to be a man, how to live, how to become a Christian, how to live consistently as a Christian, and how to be a member of society, how to become an asset to a community and no longer a liability. And that comes from y'all. So I'm very grateful to be here. I cannot wait for this Hope Center to get here. I'm ready, man. I'm ready. That's really all I got. I appreciate y'all listening.
I got one other thing that I would like to say. Brother, I appreciate it. I love you. I've never been to Hope Center. My saving grace was Walk to Emmaus. 3 years after Tyler got killed, I was still carrying him with me. Still had those anger issues. Didn't want to turn him loose. Walked in to walk to Emmaus. Still, like I said, church is just here and there every once in a while. And when I got there, I was ready to leave. Matter of fact, got there on a Thursday. Thursday night, I went and packed my stuff, headed toward the door. And there was a man by the name of Truman Smith stopped me at the door. He said, "David, just give me a little bit." And I thought, whatever. So I went back, I unpacked all my stuff, and they said, "Well, you got to be quiet tonight." I thought, whatever, I ain't doing it. So I was standing outside, I was talking to everybody, and they said, "Man, you got to be quiet. People need this time." I said, "I don't care what they need, I'm just here." So Friday night, they all went up front, and they was praying and people falling out everywhere. And I'm sitting right here, God, look at them idiots. What are they doing? So I sat back, and evidently I must have been laughing. Well, Truman Smith come back there, and he said, "Dave, come up." I thought, okay, whatever. So I walked up there, and I hadn't much more than hit my knees, and I went, bam, stretched out across the floor. Well, and this is what they told me. Of course, I didn't remember anything. They told me, said, "David, you got up on your feet." And now I do remember this part, but when I opened my eyes, I didn't see Truman Smith standing in front of me. I seen the face of Jesus. And I'm sitting here going, whoa, what have I done? So the whole time, and every time I would look at him, this face, he would take a step back. And I would start hearing these little faint sounds of give. So, okay. So I would take a step toward him, but he would take a step backwards. And this little voice kept getting louder. Give. So I would take another step. He would take a step back. So I done my walk to Emmaus at the Methodist, or the First Methodist Church here in Livingston. Well, if anybody had been in there, they know there's a big cross in the back of the church. So I made another step toward this silhouette, and he made about 3 steps backwards. And then I heard this voice ringing in my ear. Give him. So, okay, I still don't know what he was talking about. So I took another step forward. And when I took that last step forward, I looked, and laying in between the cross and me was Tyler's body laying there. So, of course, I lost it. And the last words that I heard was, "Give him to me." So I proceeded to walk over, and it's just like you would walk up and pick somebody up. I picked him up, took him, and I laid him at the feet of Jesus. And that was the day that I got my freedom. So, buddy, I've not seen a Hope Center, but I've had my freedom.
Thank both of you guys for doing that. Amen. It's hard to tell you a story, especially the first time if you've never done it. But it is a very special time, and it's for the church. It's for the people to hear. It's for the warriors of God to know that we ain't different, right? That we ain't some psychos. This is how we're going to end. I'm going to have you guys to come down front, and if you would like to come forward and lay hands on them and pray for them, I invite you up. We're just going to end dismissing a prayer over them. I know a lot of times when we do open ourselves up and tell our stories, that the enemy tries to prod his head back in very soon. So we're going to pray. We're going to give God thanks for what he's done in their life, but also ask him for protection over them. Okay?